Hello and welcome to Bread and Rosaries, the left Christian podcast which was on the shortlist for the FIFA Peace Prize. I'm Ben Molyneux-Headington. I'm joined today by Adam Spears. Say hi, Adam.
Hello.
And Johnny Bell. Say hi, Johnny.
Hello.
It's fair to say we are pretty annoyed not to win that prize. We're starting to suspect that process has been rigged against us. How are you feeling about it, guys?
I'm pretty distraught. Yeah.
I mean, I still can't believe we weren't even nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, to be honest. if that fucking pretender Malala can win it, why can't we?
I think it's because we haven't started enough wars and conflicts. I think we're missing a trick there.
Has Malala particularly got a hand in starting wars and conflicts?
There's possibly a reference to Obama happening here rather than...
Yeah.
Yes, that was a bit of an oblique, yeah.
Rather than Malala, that actual piece of shit. For anyone that's missed this, the FIFA, at the World Cup draw for the next World Cup that's in America, gave Donald Trump the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize.
FIFA is it wallows in its villainous nature so much that I respect it.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of love it at this point.
But also, they got him to then say that they should rename American football and call football, not soccer in the US. So, in terms of, effectiveness of what they've done,
wow.
Fair play. Yeah. More organisations should make up a prize to give to Donald Trump and see what happens. Maybe if Hamas gave him some sort of prize, we could solve the ongoing genocide like that.
I've just had a vision of the Bread and Rosaries Awards.
Okay, maybe that's our Christmas episode this year, is the Bread and Rosaries Awards. And we will give out the Peace Prize to who we think most deserves it.
Yeah, and the FIFA thing just feels, it's almost like an effort award. You know, when you're at school and you get the effort award.
Oh, the participation award.
Yes, and it's actually football news that I heard about, which is, really quite surprising.
Is that because you're a big fan of FIFA? Not of football, but of FIFA?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen about the... there's a FIFA museum run by FIFA. It's basically the history of why FIFA fucking rules. There's a couple of articles about it that are really funny because it is just the most nakedly hagiographical museum in history.
Well, it's like the FIFA film, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where it's like Tim Roth playing Sepp Blatter or something.
Yeah.
I didn't realise there was a FIFA film. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So, hopefully we'll get some news about our appeal about the FIFA Peace Prize. But while we wait for that, let us move on to what else is on our mind grapes.
What else is on my mind grapes?
And my notes here say, Adam went somewhere and it made him think stuff. Because that is all the information that I've been given about what is on mind grapes.
That is what I said. And it's probably going to be so shit that we have to just cut it anyway.
If we start doing that, Adam, there won't be a podcast left.
That's true. I mean, we'll be saving everyone a lot of time, won't we? Yeah. So I went to a winter fair at a city farm, and it was exactly what you imagine it to be, full of hippies and lefty types and artists and that kind of thing. And it was joyous. It was really, really nice. I had such a nice Saturday afternoon.
Can I just pause you here and said it's exactly what you imagine it to be like? I do not know what a winter fair was. I thought it was like a non-denominational Christmas market or something.
Well, which it kind of is, yeah.
But what makes it lefty?
Because only left. Look, I live in Bristol. Okay, if people turn up, it's lefty.
yeah.
I think I'm probably the least left-wing person in Bristol.
So what you're saying is you're more right-wing now?
I'm not more right-wing now. I'm just more right-wing in comparison to the whole of Bristol.
Yeah.
That's not true. I mean, demonstrably not true. I went past a house the other day with a Union flag that had the words "Stop the boats" printed in the middle of it. So, like, yeah, not all of Bristol
Glorious.
is left wing, unfortunately.
Yes.
But, so, I mean, I respect it almost. You know, it's they're being very direct about what they believe.
And there's more of a social cost in Bristol, right? Like, you do that in certain areas, and it's like, yeah, that's what we all think, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
not that part of Bristol.
Right, okay.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so I went to this winter fair. It was lovely. I ate some bread pudding. I scritched the ears of a pig.
Oh, lovely.
It was great. And it kind of just got me thinking really mean things about the church.
I had a nice time trying to be shitty about the church. It's so on brand for you. Like,
I know. Okay, I'm not pointing the finger at every single church and every single congregation saying they all suck, right? But when I was there was a part of me that just kind of felt like this is what I wanted church to feel like. And then I was like, why doesn't church feel like this? Why is it so hard for us to create that sense of joy, even though we talk about joy and the importance of joy and that kind of thing? And really, what I wanted to know is, why don't we have pigs in church to scritch the ears of them?
but to be clear, you mean animals. Because unfortunately, we do have too many pigs in churches already.
Yeah. No, it was just. But in all seriousness, though, it was just a really nice time, and it felt kind of spiritual to me in a weird way, and a lot of it just got me thinking about, like, we seem to struggle. Some churches do similar things, but like a lot of the time, we seem to struggle with both accessing this genuine kind of joy, but also just organizing good communal things. And we have so much potential to do that and so much power to do that, but there's always something in the way. Like, for me, I think that, like, if you I know I bang on about agape meals all the time, but like, that is what the church was. That's what it was in its earliest days. And now, you know, most churches don't even know what that is. And if they do, they don't do it. And if they do it, it's irregular, very irregular. And I just think we've lost something there. You know, we really have. And for me, the thing we've lost, apart from the organizational ability to you know, do that, is the joy. So how do we steal this winter fair joy and bring it back to the church? Or is the church finished? Ben says yes.
To an extent, I think it is. And I think to an extent, the church needs to die in whatever way that is in order for it to be reborn, you know, to be resurrected.
Such a good minister, Johnny.
I know. But I think a part of the reason why that joy is not there is because there is so much lack. And it's a kind of lack that is not when I am weak, when I am strong. Sorry, when I am weak, I am strong. Let's get that right. It's a lack that just wears away. And I think it's almost been this gradual deterioration of church that people have just ignored. And now it's got to a point where people are realizing that things are bad, but it's kind of too late for a lot of churches. The conversations that we're now having should have been happening 20 years ago in a very active way. But yeah. And I think this joy thing and community building and being together is not just a church issue. I think it's our, you know, a societal issue, because community no longer is really much of a thing because there's no money for it. We are so absorbed into being self-sufficient in our homes through technology and all sorts of things.
And third spaces have, like, died a death as well. Like, now a lot of third spaces are just another coffee shop, and you can't, like, a coffee shop's fine. I like a coffee shop, you know, from time to time, but it's not the same as the kind of third spaces that we've had in the past, that we still have in some places, but yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah, and you've got to pay for them. In order to be there, you've got to spend money, and a lot of people don't have that, or at least on a regular basis, that disposable income to be able to do that, and disposable time to be able to do it. If you're exhausted from working your 2-3 jobs, you're not necessarily going to go out. You're just going to lie in bed and doom scroll.
This is the thing, is like, and I see this in my hometown, but I see it in a lot of places. It's ties into the kind of gentrification of like loads of places, because now so many places, like so many third spaces, are becoming inaccessible to the average person. Like they're not built for people who don't have loads of disposable income. They're built for people who, offer, like in my hometown, for example, largely people who are going like day trippers, or people who have sold their home in London and bought one for a third of the price in my hometown.
Yeah.
They're not actually for most people.
Something interesting that happened. I was unlucky enough to be selected to be at the Your Party founding conference the other week, and there was an interesting debate that was going on there, where there was loads of stuff that's been voted on. One of the votes was at the next conference whether it should be conference delegates voting or whether it should be anyone online voting. So every member has the right to vote online. And I was part of what turned out to be an extremely small minority of people who were dead set against the online voting. And the reason for that is that although it feels more democratic on the surface, what it does is completely play into the atomization narrative. And actually, the whole point of deliberative democracy is you come together in a room. I changed my mind hearing certain people speak and like hearing certain ideas delivered in that room that if I was online and just clicking on things, I probably wouldn't have changed my mind about. And actually, something like online voting allows you to feel like you're engaging without having to actually engage in any meaningful way. And obviously there's things, I think, hybrid like approaches to this is really important, because there are people who struggle to get to physical venues, health issues, disability, all this sort of stuff. Like, I don't want.
Damn it, Ben! I was going to lay into you for and now I can't. Yeah, but you preempted my criticism.
But yeah, but there are ways of making that an inclusive conversation that is a conversation, not just. And it was interesting where I think I was fascinated by the extent. I mean, online voting won by like 96% or something crazy. Like it was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a clear victory. And I kind of thought that's interesting because no one is thinking. I think particularly post COVID, like actually, and how many churches have this thing of like, oh, you can just come in and be anonymous or whatever, and I get that, and I get the appeal of that, and that's got a value, but actually I don't know, there's something being missed about genuine communal experience.
Hasn't got a value to you, Ben. You don't go to church. As if that appeals to you.
I actually didn't go to church today, so you're right as well.
Shocker.
Don't worry, Ben. I went twice. I went for you as well.
Sarah went. I stayed in bed.
There is something interesting about that anonymity stuff, actually, because I was talking with people about like engaging with church online, and how and they made there has been a comparison in the Methodist Church, particularly with online communion, of the people who go to like a cathedral and just sort of sit at the back and are by themselves, with people who go online either streaming, so there's no profile or anything there, so you can't see them on Zoom or whatever. And I disagreed with that comparison, because even if you're at the back of the cathedral, you're still physically there, you are still seen, you are not fully anonymous, and there's still that togetherness. But being completely faceless, audioless, everythingless online is true anonymity, and it's much easier for people to be sort of bad faith characters kind of thing there than physically in person.
something about breathing the same air and being, even if you do not interact with a single other person there, you have shared space with those people. And I'm not necessarily saying that online is bad. I mean, we record this podcast online. I do a lot of work online. Like I think actually for that accessibility, like there are important things you can do with that. But I think that it can be used in ways that, only exacerbate the issues of atomization that make you into just an individual unit who does engage with things based on your own individual preferences and isn't in any meaningful sense part of a community. And I'm becoming increasingly concerned about how much we've lent into allowing people to be anonymous, allowing people to kind of keep things at arm's length, and actually whether that is ultimately a capitalist idea that we're buying into.
So what I'm getting from this is that you seem to think that the winter fair at the city farm wouldn't have worked if it had been online. And I'm not sure about that.
Only if you all had a pig to scritch the ears off, right?
Well, that's what I'm thinking, is they need to send us all a pig in the post.
Or have some sort of technology so you can, tactile thing to be able to feel the pig's ear and do it, virtually. That would work.
I'm not sure it'd be the same. It's the same argument people make who really love keeping the stuff that colonizing nations stole and put in museums, where they say, oh well, if we gave it back and used an exact replica, people wouldn't come. It wouldn't have the same draw.
Only you're saying you agree with that argument.
Look, I haven't thought that far ahead,
Ben. You're wondering out loud.
Adam is straight out of the line being like, you get your fucking hands off our marbles, Grease, all right?
No, you get your fucking hands off your marbles.
Exactly, yes.
But there is something about using technology to mediate interactions, and the ideal is to be in person, face to face. But if you can't, then you make those reasonable adjustments, essentially, to make it accessible. And I think that people don't seem to realize that aspect, that actually being in person is the best. And it's just it's making it possible of the virtual, and a lot is lost. And I don't think people think critically about it. They just do it. And there is something, I don't know. It further feeds into this whole thing of being self-sufficient, keeping in your own thing. And actually, Ben, when we were getting ready for today, you were saying about how working at work, online, doing things in the breaks, you can do bits around the house rather than interacting with people.
We're going to have to delete this.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No, that's fine. Your boss isn't going to hear this.
No, we're fine on that. I think everyone puts the washing on during the breaks of online training.
Yeah,
that is.
Absolutely. And it takes a minute.
I tell you what, you talk to anyone and they'll tell you that they prefer face-to-face training. Like, I've never met anyone who doesn't, because we get it, right? Like, that being in the room, even if it's less convenient, and, even if somebody's doing it every day, it would, on one level, it's far more convenient for me to be at home and sit online and have my breaks at home and all the rest of it. But the reality is, if you gave me the option, I'd pick face-to-face every day.
Yeah, but then you have to wear trousers.
That is true. I did get a message the other day from a colleague who was sitting in on some training, being like, in a non-weird way, what trousers are you wearing? And I was like, what? And they were like, because I'm thinking about whether I should be wearing trackies. And I was like, we're online. Of course I'm wearing trackies. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
I'm online. Of course I'm not wearing any trousers.
It's not that warm up here, Adam. You're in balmy Bristol, but up here in the north, it's cold. Like...
You're in a house. Do you do your training in the garden?
God, Adam being able to afford heating.
It's an old house, and it's therefore it is a pretty cold house, the way it's been designed. So, but that is neither here nor there. So I'm going to draw our mind grapes to the close. Adam, I think in future you are permitted to once again go places and think about things and bring it back to us when you feel ready. I try not to leave the house. So.
I'll do that. Shout out to St. Werburgh's farm. I think it's Werburgh's or Werburgh's or something. in Bristol. Everyone should go there.
What a delightful, nice thing, a lovely story. Why don't we completely shift the tone and talk about something terrible that's happened?
Yay.
For our main topic today, we're going to return to another one of our classic episode formats. It's that I like to call, What the Fuck Are the Church of England Playing At Now?
Heresy! Remove this filth!
So, Adam, you sent this to me. Would you like to introduce to everyone what on earth the Church of England are up to this time?
Yeah, so the Church of England have decided that they are going to make it easier, that they're going to allow the church to invest in certain arms companies as long as those arms companies are not in what they consider to be despotic regimes. Which essentially means that you're allowed to invest in NATO countries and a few others that aren't in NATO. And I think that that's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Given that NATO is not exactly free of blame and doesn't have, it's not like it has no blood on its hands.
Adam, are you saying you don't support NATO?
It would be difficult for me to explain to you just how much I hate and loathe NATO, Ben.
But you hate nation states, so presumably something made up and together of multiple nation states, thereby getting rid of their sovereignty, is good.
Yes, this is the real internationalism, right?
Yeah.
But Adam, we're the good guys.
It's very telling that you identify with NATO there, Johnny.
I thought Johnny was saying queer people. That's usually the we. I have to say, when I read this story, my first thought was, who looks at the Church of England and everything going on there and thinks, just the problem is it's being hamstrung by how ethical it all is. It's just, if we can just lower the standards for its ethics, I think we're probably going to solve a lot of the problems here. What on earth is, what I would like to know is what your read on why they thought this was a good idea was.
I mean, their argument will be that in certain ways they've made it harder to invest in certain companies. So they say they've made the bar to investing in defence businesses. It remains high, and there are some ways in which it's even higher now. But it's demonstrably been made really quite low in these other ways as well. I think I'm going to sound sort of overly theological, I guess. But I think it's a theology of mammon.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think it's allowing what you think is a capitalist necessity to dictate your theology, and it's a cyclical reasoning. I think they basically decide that they need to be able to make as much money as they can, and the best way to do this is to allow you to invest in things that are and of course the fact that it's NATO as well speaks very much to the fact, particularly for the Church of England, that this is it's a national church, not just a national church, it's an established church. So of course the mindset behind it, the thinking behind it, is always going to have that underpinning of statist, not just statist, but British statist ideology, because the people who are making the decisions come from that establishment class. So they can't really see it any other way.
No, and I very much agree with you that it's allowing, it's we want to make money, and it's for the good of the church, so it's okay if we do it from the quote unquote good guys. I told the two of my churches this morning, today, when I was there, and they were shocked. They were, really troubled by it, because it's, this season particularly, we might use one of the metaphors to describe God and Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. How on earth is investing in weapons that kill people? And I dislike calling it defense systems and things, because it's weapons that are designed to maim and kill. And how on earth is that in line with Christ?
This is one of the few ways in which a decision that Trump has made recently has been sort of more aligned with the truth of a matter, when he's changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, because that's what it is.
Not a man for a euphemism, our Donald, is he?
No. And that's what it was in this country as well. It was the Department of War. It didn't look as good, so we changed it to Department of Defense. It's really heinous, but it also, I think there are potentially two things happening. One is it's a sort of sign of what's happening in the world. But the second is almost as a consequence of what's happening in the world. It's people are at least being honest now of what they think, rather than masking it and putting it in a veneer of things, which might be more helpful, to be honest.
One of the things that I wondered was whether it was indirectly to do with Ukraine, because I think the Ukraine war is like the only anywhere near recent example of a war that Britain is supporting or involved in that most people feel is righteous. And, we can have conversations about the role of NATO in kind of provoking the Ukraine war and all the rest of it. But I think, there's a general consensus that, the Ukraine, the defense of Ukraine from an invading force feels morally righteous to most people. And it's been a long old time. Falklands probably the last time that was true, in terms of like a majority of people kind of feeling that this was a righteous war that we were involved in, right? And I just wonder if that's changed the narrative a little bit on war, particularly in light of the fact that the American government seems to be massively pulling out. And I don't think it's as direct as, we should do this because it supports Ukrainians, but whether actually the kind of mood music around British involvement in war has been impacted by that enough that they feel like it's possible to do this.
Is it a sort of valorizing war in some ways?
Yeah, something like that. And I don't think it's direct, but yeah, something kind of in the water almost.
Because it's like how war used to be seen pre-First World War, where it was seen as a valorous thing, and the idea of the war heroes and all this sort of stuff. And that was largely sustained by the fact that the majority of the population didn't experience the direct consequences of war. And again, that's sort of what you're alluding to as well, because it's far removed. And I wonder, there is an interesting parallel there.
It's interesting how many, I rode past a church just today that I noticed had a Ukraine flag flying on its flagpole in its yard. No other flag, not even a British flag, but certainly not, the flag of Palestine or even Israel, actually, So it's definitely not just in the culture of society at large, but more specifically, yes, there's a lot more support for Ukraine and the, I think within that, certainly implicit within that, the right of Ukraine and perhaps even the necessity of Ukraine to fight that war. But I also think it's something that churches are relatively overt about this, but aren't having those conversations about, when we think about Jesus as the Prince of Peace and so on. There is just sort of an assumption there that that's okay. And I think what's interesting about that is that the language that the church uses seems to reflect the world in this really quite closely. And I think there's a parallel there bringing it back to the investment in arms companies with the language the church uses when it kind of mirrors the language of capitalism when it starts to talk about what it will invest in and won't invest in. It becomes the language of pragmatism, essentially pragmatic capitalism, rather than the language of Jesus.
Yeah, and it almost reminds me of the kind of prudent business person in the Victorian era, of the sort of early Victorian era, sort of middle industrial, and it's that kind of sensibility of, well, this is prudent to do, it's practical, it's going to help, and that's worth it in the end. And it's placing with the ends justifying the means. It's saying, this is a necessary evil. It's almost that kind of attitude. And it's like, well, yeah, instead of doing the hard work of going, well, actually, in the kingdom, will this be a part of it? If not, then what are we doing?
And I think you make an interesting point about, there's almost a quote-unquote common sense framing. And I think common sense is one of the most powerful ideological tools capitalism has, right? Because so much of what is common sense, common sense is divorced from ethical responsibility, right? Common sense is not about making a moral decision, it's about making a sensible decision. But two, it presumes that there's universality to common sense. It is common, it is a universal experience of, well, this just makes sense. And if you don't believe that, well, then you're not sensible. You've not got any sense. And I think, yeah, that's absolutely what's happened. The language, well, it's just common sense to invest in the best bottle. And it is under the moral and logical framework of capitalism. It makes the most sense by far to invest in things like arms companies. But actually, does it make moral sense to do that? Does it make ethical sense to do that? Those are questions that sit outside that kind of ideological framing of common sense.
I think what we're seeing more and more as well is that there is not a huge deal of space between this idea of, I believe this, I have common sense, and if you don't believe this, you don't have common sense, and actually the idea that if you don't believe this, you are in some way not just wrong, but bad. That you are counter to that common sense has sort of become synonymous with kind of language around, treason at its most extreme form, I think.
And I think it's also being associated, certainly in the church concept, with being a faithful disciple. It conflates being a follower of Christ with what is being deemed as right or common sense. And there's this, I know, Ben, you say that it's kind of outside of morality, but it's almost using morality as a way of justifying it, saying this is the right thing to do. It's it's almost like, saying this is faithful and pious thing to do.
Yeah, there's it would be irresponsible of us with the things that God has given us if we don't invest them properly, right?
Stewarding God's resources. That's one I've heard people use as an argument for this kind of thing.
Stewarding God's resources by killing and maiming other people and causing hurt.
But people aren't resources.
No.
They don't require stewarding. It's money that needs stewarding.
Says the guy who works for HR.
Okay, fuck you. We've been over this. No, I'm not going to rise to this.
Didn't it used to be called personnel or something like that before?
You make me sick.
I work for training. We're not like that.
And actually, HR are basically the police, but for businesses.
Yeah, let's move on from this because I feel like I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. We will come back to talking about that, but before we do that, I would like to tell you, please, about a Saint of the Week I have for you.
Saint of the Week.
I am going to talk about Procop, who I assure you is not pro-cop.
Unlike you.
Very clear about this. Procop is often known as Procop the Great, which is fantastic because there is actually a mate of his who is also called Procop, who gets called Procop the Lesser, which is just a huge own on that guy. Being like, oh, I'm the Great, and you, mate, you are the Lesser. Real big dick move there from Procop the Great. When I first saw him, I thought his name was Procop Holy. In fact, what I realised was holy was a Czech term, and it essentially translates to Procop the Bold. So, or possibly Procop the Shaven, which is less exciting. And that is because he had tonsure, so he had the funny hair that where you only have the bits around the side and everything else is shaved off. Which I hadn't realised was like a pious thing. I don't know how I completely missed this. I just assumed it was because priests and monks were bad at haircuts. But it's like it's a.
Did you really?
Yeah, genuinely. I was just like, that's a funny haircut, and just moved on. I never considered it in any depth.
That's glorious.
But yeah, if you're as stupid as me, it turns out that that's like a specific religious significance, having the tonsure. Anyway, Procop is an interesting bloke, and I'm going to put Adam on the spot here and ask Adam to set me a little bit of context, please, about, because I know that you know a lot more than I do. In like 2 minutes, what are the Hussite Wars?
Oh, blimey. Okay, the Hussite
I didn't warn Adam I was going to do this to him, by the way.
Well, yeah, you warned me just before we started recording that you were going to do this. Yeah, in a nutshell, the Hussite Wars were a series of wars that happened in the regions of what is now kind of Czech Republic, so regions of Moravia, Bohemia, Silesia, and they came about because about 100 years before what we call the Protestant Reformation, there was another Reformation that took place, led largely by a man called Jan Hus, whose anglicised name is, Ben?
John Goose. What a name.
which you're right, is a better name, and we should anglicise it more. Yeah.
Generally, anglicising is bad, but in this specific case, it's too cool not to.
I mean, it's probably very funny in Czech as well. I don't know. But yeah, basically there were tensions in that area, and there's all kind of stuff that came into this. So there were tensions around nationalism, sort of ethno-nationalism. There were more German-speaking people who were generally richer coming into that area and taking up positions that had more power. And this was all tied up in how religion was practiced as well. And ultimately a movement was started that became a kind of reformation, a sort of fairly localized reformation within those areas, led, as I say, by John Goose. And ultimately, he was summoned to the Vatican. Hi, folks. Adam in the editing booth here. I just wanted to correct part of my very sloppy summary. Jan Hus wasn't summoned to the Vatican. He was summoned to the Council of Constance in Constance, which was called by King Sigismund of Hungary, who wanted to end the ongoing schism we now know as the Western Schism, in which at one point there were 3 rival popes. But it was also about dealing with dissension in the church more broadly, which is where Jan Hus comes in. Hus only agreed to go because Sigismund himself promised him safe passage to and from the council, and at first Hus was indeed free to move about the city, but he was soon arrested due to a rumour that he was going to flee. Sigismund was initially very angry at this, but was convinced by those opposing Hus that he didn't need to uphold a promise to a heretic. Long story short, Hus was kept prisoner, largely in terrible conditions, for 8 months, and after a series of trials, he was ultimately executed in July 1415. And basically, very, very long and short of it is that shit kicked off. And the Catholic Church went to war, and other groups with them went to war against the Hussites. And so you ended up with a number of groups, but probably the most well-known group existing to this day is the Moravian Church, who are kind of cool in some ways, I think. Yeah, there's a lot more that happened, and a lot more that happened between those times, but yeah.
So, Prokop, interesting fella. Married priest. This is pre-Reformation as well. So, a bit controversial, but very much in the Hussite thing is much more acceptable. He starts off as a bougie liberal. So he's from a reasonably well-off family, like relatively well-known, prosperous, whatever. And he starts off, there's a Hussite. He's in the moderate wing of the Hussites, which ultimately the radical Hussites lose because the moderates join force with the Catholic Church, because you can't trust liberals. They will always stab you in the back. A lesson from history that we learn once again. But yes, he starts off as a liberal, and he actually goes travelling for a bit, and it's not clear why, but basically he comes back as like a fire-breathing radical, which is really quite cool. And he ends up being essentially the main military commander. It's a bit complicated. He's often described as being the head of the Hussite armies, but that is to oversimplify the situation. But he's probably the preeminent military commander. What I found fascinating about this, and potentially a little bit uncomfortable for us, is that he continues to be a serving priest whilst being a military commander. So it's not just that he continues to hold the office of priest while being a military commander, but that he continues to act in the communities that he's in as a priest, taking on the role as priest alongside being a military commander.
Does sound a bit like he was actually pro-cop, Ben. Not going to lie.
I think there's a difference between the police and the army, and not so much in this country, but there are radical formations of armies that exist that maybe aren't for the police. But that is far too in-depth to get into when we're talking about this guy, but I'm going to defend him on that count at least. But yeah, really interesting. He ends up essentially leading the fight back against the crusade. So the Holy Roman Empire sends a crusade to Bohemia to try and so loads of people go and volunteer for a crusade. Like all the crusades, it was really, really bad, and they get their asses kicked by the forces, the Hussite forces, led by Prokop. And yeah, they get sent back on the merry way. He continues to have quite a few military victories, and again, from what I can see, he seems to be quite keen on negotiating peace. That's not to say that he wasn't someone who was, sending people to their deaths and sending people to kill. He absolutely was. He was a military commander. But he actually does, spends a lot of time basically repeatedly jumping into Germany, causing trouble and running away again without ever looking to occupy it, and eventually kind of comes to some sort of agreement with the Germans about not doing that anymore, when by all accounts they probably could have just taken a big chunk of Germany for themselves if they wanted to. Like, they had the manpower and the ability and the organisation or whatever, but they choose not to be an invading force and instead be a defensive force. Prokop does then go to a big council to basically try and have a debate. This is in the middle of the Hussite Wars, or kind of near the end, but at this point, the Catholic Church is looking to cut a deal, and so they have a big meet up. And ultimately, Prokop leaves, going, there's nothing here, they don't actually want to deal with us, and ends up just going back to Bohemia. He then attempts a siege that does not go very well, and eventually has to beat a retreat because he loses the support of his soldiers due to the length of the siege that's happening. So not too great, but then he does redeem himself at the end because he's back in Prague. And at this point is the point where the liberals have betrayed the Hussites. So the liberal Hussites, the moderate Hussites, have joined forces with the Catholics, and they look to take control of Prague. Prague's a bit of a divided city, and in the end, Newtown, which is a quarter of Prague, is taken over by the residents of Old Town. Newtown is a radical Hussite kind of hotbed, but Old Town, which is very moderate and conservative, takes over Newtown. Both Procops basically show up to try and defend the residents of Newtown from the attacks. And in the end, sadly, both of them die defending Newtown. And I think it would be entirely reasonable to call Prokop a martyr, because he dies for his religious beliefs that are, I think, probably a lot closer to ours than any of the other ones knocking around at that particular time. Dies for his religious beliefs, defending the kind of area, the segment of Prague that also has the same religious beliefs, against kind of forces looking to take over and subsume that into their view of the world. So an interesting fella. I thought it would be particularly interesting to talk about a military commander in an episode where we're mostly going to be doing our hippie pacifist bullshit. But I think someone generally worth considering as someone who is, maybe not making exactly the same decisions we would make, but someone who is certainly broadly on the right side of things. And when we did our re-release recently of some of our old episodes, there was an episode with, is it Robin Hanford, wasn't it, that we had on talking about remembrance?
Yeah.
And he said something really interesting, which is he's not a pacifist, but he doesn't think that pacifists are wrong in the context that we are in, but that in a revolutionary situation, they could turn out to be quite badly wrong. And that's kind of how I feel about Prokop, is that actually it's stories like his and the radical Hussites and their war defending their religious freedom, essentially, is a situation in which pacifism is maybe not as useful a framework, whereas in the situation we're in right now, I think pacifism is a very useful framework.
Yeah, and it's almost using action, violence, however you want to describe it, as a way of preventing greater violence, in a sense, and resisting the harm and the oppression of what could be caused. And
I think it's really important to me that it was a defensive force.
Yeah.
They, whilst they did obviously, they performed offensive actions, they did so in order to take back places that had been taken from them, rather than kind of, they weren't looking to, as the Germany thing proved, they weren't looking to take over other places. They just wanted their religious freedom where they were. Which I think is a big and important distinction there.
Yes, rather than trying to take over and have and oppress at the expense of others, it's like, no, we want to push our own, freedoms.
So let's return to our main topic and talk to a little bit more about the decision of the Church of England. And there was a kind of pair of sentences that I really enjoyed in this, which was the Commissioner's social lead for responsible investment, Dan Neil, told the Church Times that this was not a, quote, backdoor route, unquote, to investment in nuclear weapons. Rather, he said, the approach allowed the commissioners to judge whether a company with a non-essential involvement in the chain of supply, such as making a small proportion of its revenue on non-essential equipment used in nuclear submarines, should be excluded from potential investment. What is the definition of a backdoor route to investment in nuclear weapons? What do you mean by that? Because you have then defined for me what a backdoor route to investing in nuclear weapons would look like, right? Like, you have consistently said, this is not a backdoor route to invest in nuclear weapons. We have just opened the opportunity for us to indirectly invest in nuclear weapons. What do you mean? That is the sting. You've just said it isn't happening.
This is like what I mean when I'm talking about the language that they use, right? Because they will justify things using. Oh, hang on, I've actually got a thing for this.
You communists! You rattle off a lot of fancy words, don't you?
It doesn't quite work, does it? Because they're not communists. But
fairly sure no. Dan Neil is. I don't know him personally. I would say he's probably not a communist.
Probably not.
Possibly, yeah. But no, but this is what I mean, because they end up their language ends up reflecting the language of the culture that they're in, i.e., a capitalist culture, such that they end up defending and justifying actions that are quite demonstrably contrary to fairly fundamental tenets of Jesus's teachings.
Yeah. And what I find, I mean, what you were saying there, Ben, it is so painfully clear of what they're doing. And they probably do know what they're doing, but they're just BSing, basically, and trying to. It's like management speak, isn't it? I'm trying to cover my tracks, make myself look better, make the company look better. I'm not
sure it is. I know what you're saying. I think that there is an element of that, but I think they're saying things to convince themselves. I don't think that they are genuinely know that they are doing something evil and they're trying to pretend they're not. I think they maybe do deep down, and they therefore have to justify doing the things they do. Because I just don't. I don't think that the way he's saying stuff is really about convincing other people so much as repeating the justification you've given yourselves internally. There might be one or two people who are just completely amoral involved, but I think most of these people are convincing themselves that it is fine to invest in these because we've got this, and actually it's not really that bad then, is it? Like I think they are convinced themselves of this, and I think they allow themselves to be convinced of something that is deeply immoral, because it's easier, and because that's the kind of dominant culture, both within the culture at large and within the Church of England.
No, I see that. Yeah. And it's, I just, as soon as I saw this article, I was so cross. I don't know how. And I've been trying to frame it in my head. And I've been chewing over this problem for a long time, and I haven't quite come to a conclusion about it. But what I do think is that being alive, living in this world, is inherently violent. So obviously eating and killing animals, that is violent. But also we have to we eat and kill plants, and plants are still alive. We are what's called heterotrophs, so we have to eat other organisms to survive, and that is an inherently violent thing. So life, whether you like it or not, is violent, and so it becomes a case of, well, what violence do we permit? What violence do we allow? What violence do we try and avoid? And it's almost like, as you're saying there, Ben, like they're trying to convince themselves that they're not doing that much harm. So they're trying to avoid some violence. But actually on the outside, it's painfully obvious to see that they are indirectly generating more violence that could be avoided by participating and giving to organizations that enable violence to happen. And I just like there's I don't have any words. I'm really cross. There's no justification for it.
So one of the interesting things, I don't know if you've read up about this Dan Neil guy. Do you know what he has previously done?
No.
There have been a few things. Obviously, he's done sort of stuff around quote-unquote ethical investment and that kind of thing before. But he has a master's in security, conflict, and international development, which I think, like, if you know anything about those masters, that's not a... You're not exactly doing a peacemaking masters. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like that's not.
No.
That's either you're going to be a spook or you're going to work for the army, right? Like that's what that.
Right. And interestingly, before that, he spent 10 years in the Royal Navy.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I should have predicted this. I should have known this is what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And was part of a Difford-led provincial reconstruction team in Helmand province.
Oh, fuck me. Fucking hell.
So this is the guy who is the responsible investment social lead for the church commissioners.
So this is someone who, when Jonny is talking about the levels of complicity within violence and having to manage that as part of being alive in the world, actually on the level of complicity in violence, things that he has done, this is pretty mediocre.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It depends how you judge the potential violence, the potential damage this could do, compared to what was probably a slightly more localized role when he was in the Navy, for example.
What I'm saying is not that he is doing less violence, but the level of complicity. If you are an actual serving military personnel on the ground in Helmand province, then your actual complicity in violence is going to be pretty high, even if you don't kill anyone. Right?
To be fair, I don't think in that particular role, so I think he was not in the military when he was doing that, as far as I can tell.
Right, so to clarify, once he left the military, he was then a private contractor in Afghanistan.
Well, it was a DFID-led, so it was UK government-led, so I don't quite know, but yeah, I mean, we know what happened after the war and the apparent reconstruction and so on.
This, I mean, I'm a hardline on this. This should preclude you from any sort of role within the church, right? Unless you have made amends, sought forgiveness, like confessed your sins, what you've done. But you cannot seriously appoint someone who is a career military personnel, followed by someone who carried on working in Afghanistan, like during all the shit that went down there during the occupation, and then make that person your ethical advisor, right? Your social lead for responsible investment. Like, what does this man know about social responsibility?
I think the argument that they will put for this will be something along the lines of, because these people see us, they see the left as lacking nuance, right? They think that we're very black and white in our thinking, when of course the opposite is actually true. What they will probably say about appointing someone like that is that he has done those jobs, he's kind of lived some of that life, and so he will see some of the shades of grey. He'll get the nuance of the ethical responsibilities that he will now have on him, and so they will see that experience as a good thing.
I know.
It's just so hypocritical of the church, though. And it makes me so cross. And it's like, one thing, the church is always going to be hypocritical because we're human, we're flawed, etc. But this is like a level where it is actively harming people, and in really bad ways. And it makes me... I was thinking about it today. One of the Bible readings set for the lectionary is John the Baptist, and he calls the Sadducees and Pharisees brood of vipers and things, and to try and avoid the sort of anti-Semitic stuff that you can get into it. I quite like how Robert Goss interprets or understands when it's talking about the religious leaders. It's more like the political powers of the day aligning themselves with the Roman Empire. And I feel like the church is aligning themselves with the Roman Empire when it's doing things like that. And it makes me so cross. And it's like, you should be better than this. You have to be better than this, because you are involved with being spiritual leaders and leading people to understand how God desires the world to be. This is not how God desires the world to be.
What do you mean? You think
it is outrageous.
You think God doesn't want the world nuked to shit? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
well, I mean, sometimes things have got to die to be resurrected.
Yeah, that's my reading of the flood narrative in Genesis. Is that gives us license to nuke the world to hell and back again? Like,
absolutely.
I think one of the other interesting things I picked up was the rules about what weapons are allowed and not allowed. So they won't invest in any companies that produce controversial weapons such as cluster munitions, chemical weapons, and anti-personnel mines. And I get that on one level. But if I'm having my wedding blown up, seeing as we're talking about Afghanistan, And we know that's what the Western forces did a hell of a lot of in Afghanistan, is blow up weddings. If I'm having my wedding blown up, my last thought is, well, at least it wasn't a cluster bomb that blew me up. Well, at least it wasn't chemical weapons they were utilising. Now, don't be wrong, there were reasons, particularly with chemical weapons and, like, you know, obviously the long-term impacts, all the rest of it. But it does seem like a moral fig leaf, doesn't it? A way of being like, oh, it's not that bad. But particularly when they're saying we will allow stuff involved in nukes. And I'm sorry, like, leaving aside the size of the explosion of a nuke, one of the remarkable things about nuclear weapons is the huge area of impact on a generational basis, right? Like, that is not just the areas that are directly destroyed, it is the fallout and radiation from that and the way that affects generations of people in profound ways. So if you're saying chemical weapons are wrong, but you're prepared to support on some level the proliferation of nuclear weapons, like, you have just no leg to stand on there. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But it's a way of pretending, really, that this is actually a moral decision that we've thought through really carefully.
Well, I mean, even quote-unquote conventional weapons are still awful for the environment. It's like bullets, for example. Conventional bullets contain huge amounts of lead, and that leaches into the environment, causes decades and decades of health issues and also antisocial kind of behavior issues as well, because of the effects lead has on your brain and nervous system over many, many decades. And arms manufacturers are aware of this, and they're actually trying to not use lead as much for this reason, supposedly. But it's like, even like ignoring the killing and maiming, even the impact, as you were saying about like nuclear bombs, but also conventional weapons are still really detrimental just by the sheer volume that's used. It's like there is no, even if they try and BS this, there is no getting round the devastating impact it will have.
Well, and also, I mean, you know, when we talk about conventional weapons, are they, you know, there are things that are conventional weapons that we can talk about, particularly in relation to the fact that as this article says, a spokesperson for the commissioners would not confirm whether Israel was regarded as an oppressive regime for the purposes of this policy. Israel dropped hundreds of 2,000-pound bombs on Gaza, and those bombs can kill people more than 1,000 feet away from where they're dropped. Right? These are not nuclear weapons, but they are hugely devastating things. Are they going to be allowed to invest in those weapons? Are they going to be allowed to invest in Israel, in Israeli defense, quote unquote, defense firms? I mean, yeah. And I mean, this feels tone deaf as well, actually, at a time when you've got thousands actually of people going to prison for defending the evil terrorist organization Palestine Action. And a lot of them are clergy as well. And so you've got people like this who are representatives of the church who are saying, effectively, this is wrong. And yet the people who are in control of the church's policy are potentially funding those very things.
And then they'll turn around and go, oh, but we're a failing, we're a dying church. Our numbers are going down. I don't know why.
The other thing about conventional weapons is once they're out there, you just don't know what's going to happen for them. So going back to the Ukraine example, there might be a saying, well, we need to produce weapons for Ukraine for them to use. And, leaving aside that question, something interesting is Ukraine have received from NATO a number of Mi-17 helicopters. And the reason they had them is that they originally were Soviet produced and bought by the Americans for the Afghan Air Force to fight off radical Islamists. Okay? And then they eventually have ended up having produced in Russia, being used by the Ukrainians to fight off Russia. It's And that is just a random. I happen to have an example because I was listening to a podcast the other day that spoke about it.
That's the snake eating its own tail, isn't it?
Okay, do you know what's fascinating, Adam? Is literally the reference this podcast made referring to it as yeah, exactly right.
Yes.
If you haven't listened to the Blowback podcast, the season about Afghanistan is absolutely fascinating. And yeah, it is, yeah. They repeatedly refer to it as a snake eating its own tail, the Ouroboros. But yeah, this is the sort of thing that happens all the time. Once these weapons are out there, they get reused, they get sold between organisations, and they go missing, and they end up in people's hands, and you cannot predict where these weapons are going to end up. So, and you know, the obvious example of this is America, right? Why does America have significantly higher number of deaths from gun violence than than we do in this country? Well, a big part of it is that their laws around guns mean there's just a lot more guns knocking about in America, right? And it's exactly the same principle, but on a military basis. When you produce these weapons, they will be used, and they will be used to hurt people. And even if you think you're producing them for the good guys, there's one, your conception of the good guys might need a little bit of a closer examination. But two, actually, there's no guarantee that even if those are the good guys, that they'll stay with them. Those weapons can end up anywhere. It's a cycle of violence that you're participating in actively when you invest in this stuff.
One of the key things the church is supposed to be is a prophetic voice. How can it be a prophetic voice if it is allowing itself, and allowing itself feels almost too passive, actually, too passive a phrase for what they're doing here. But you're investing in death, in destruction, because those dealing it are the state you align with, the state that your church exists in. It's not being prophetic, not even approaching being prophetic, to say, well, it's okay if our people have weapons and use them, but if other people do.
Yes. And there's something about it's almost like, well, it's not happening to our people, so it's fine. It's happening to someone else, someone other. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously, the Anglican Communion is a world church and is in lots of places. Are some of these weapons that they're investing in going to be used against people who are part of the Anglican Communion?
I mean, the way the Anglican Communion is going, Johnny, probably not.
Oh yeah, but it is a very. I think you were saying earlier that it's such a. It's essentially a white supremacist thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's white majority countries they're allowed to sell to. Yeah. The answer to your question, Johnny, is of course that it won't be used on the members of the Anglican Communion. Maybe it should be used on because most of them reside in this country.
Yeah,
that's a joke. I don't think you should kill any bishops in the Church of England. Although. No, don't do it. Don't do it. It wouldn't work. It's a bad idea.
I think one of the things that I've been trying to kind of get at is, and I'm not sure I'm going to sort of say this in a way that makes sense, bear with me, but I think there's something about the nature of money and perhaps the way the church holds wealth that makes wealth an abstraction. Right? And if wealth is an abstraction, then kind of like so are the things that you do with it and some of the ways that you gain it. It's almost like it's not really, well, it isn't really there. And if it's not really there, then does it really have any actual force?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, that does make a lot of sense. And if there's no material impact, then it's okay to do what you want with it and gain it. And that makes a lot of sense. And that would explain why they're making these rubbish justifications and thinking they're legitimate. Because in that framework, Yeah, that does make it, it seems to make it okay. They're dealing with such vast amounts of money, ordinary people cannot understand it. Like, 1 billion is huge. That is a huge, huge number.
I'm sort of riffing on my own nonsense here, but perhaps when we're thinking about wealth as an abstraction, this is where we can think about mammon, right? It's the worship of it, right? Because God is kind of an abstraction as well, right? So if you've got these two things, like they almost become these two abstract things, they kind of both become almost equally worthy of worship in the minds of those making these decisions.
And easily confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's an overlap almost in the minds of them of, and going back to that common sense argument stuff of, well, it's good stewardship of this stuff, it enables us to do mission and evangelism. Therefore,
I do think the whole argument from them can be summed up in the Simpsons bit where Lisa goes to Nelson's treehouse.
Nuke the whales? You don't really believe that, do you?
I don't know. Gotta nuke something.
that feels like about the level we're working with here. Like, well, someone's gonna die. We may as well make some money off it, right? Like, that is the
yeah.
With that classic Simpsons reference, I think that is probably all the time we have to chat about today. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you, Jonny and Adam, for joining me. If you would like to get in contact with us, we love to hear from people. All of our contact details are available at breadandrosaries.com. Please do get in contact. Also, we have a Patreon if you want to throw us some pennies. We're on all the usual social media bits, although we're not really. I should be better on being on them, but the main thing is the website breadandrosaries.com.
YouTube. We're also on YouTube. Please go and subscribe to us on YouTube, even though it's a dying platform.
And obviously it's sick behaviour to watch podcasts. But if you're the sort of person, that, sort of sick freak that does that, then that is there as an option for you.
Well, it does mean that you can actually watch the Simpsons clips rather than hear them.
Oh, that's nice.
And I suppose it helps foster those parasocial relationship stuff,
Which is what we want.
I guess. I don't know. Adam, where in the world can people find you?
You can find me most places at CommieXIAN.
Jonny, I know that you like to be unseen, unknown, and unheard, but is there anything you want to plug?
It's Advent. Go to church.
I feel too uncomfortable with that. Like,
Stop Bible bashing, Jonny. Blimey.
Yeah.
No, it's church bashing. Doing that Bible stuff in church, surely.
Don't go to church. Go to a winter fair. That's the.
Oh yeah, do that. Stroke a pig. Yeah, maybe if you can get lucky enough and find cows and donkeys.
So that is it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we will see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you later.